The house was quiet, the kind of silence that usually signifies peace, but tonight it felt like the breath held before a scream. On the kitchen counter, next to her keys, sat a single, slightly worn photograph face down, the only explanation he would leave behind after 10 years of marriage. It wasn't a confession of anger, but a mirror he needed her to look into when she finally woke up alone. If you find yourself drawn to stories about the quiet tragedies that happen behind closed doors and the secrets that redefine our lives, stay with me because we are just getting started. The radiator in the corner of the bedroom hissed, a metallic, rhythmic complaint that Ryan Reeves had promised to fix 3 weeks ago. Now, lying in the dark, staring at the water stains spreading across the popcorn ceiling like a bruise, he realized he probably never would. It was 2:14 a.m. in Pittsburgh. Outside, the wind whipped through the skeletons of the maple trees lining the street, rattling the single-pane windows of the second-floor apartment. Beside him, Jennifer was asleep, or at least her breathing was steady enough to mimic sleep. But Ryan knew the difference. He knew the heavy, exhausted slumber of a woman who had spent 10 hours on her feet carrying trays of eggs and hash browns. This wasn't that. This was a shallow, guarded silence. Ryan shifted his weight, the old mattress springs groaning beneath his frame. His hands, still faintly stained with the grease of a transmission rebuild he'd wrestled with all afternoon, rested on his chest. He turned his head slightly. The blue light of a smartphone pulsed on the nightstand on her side of the bed. It vibrated once, short, sharp. Jennifer didn't move, but the rhythm of her breath hitched, just for a fraction of a second. Ryan stared at the back of her head, at the tangle of dark hair spread across the pillow. He remembered a time when they would sleep curled into each other, a knot of limbs seeking warmth in the drafty winters. Now there was a 12-inch demilitarized zone of cold sheet between them. He wanted to ask. The words were right there, sitting heavy in his throat like swallowing a stone. "Who is texting you at 2 in the morning, Elle?" But he didn't ask. He was a mechanic. He understood how things worked. He understood that sometimes if you pulled on a loose thread, the whole engine block fell apart. And tonight, he was too tired to watch his life disassemble. He got up, the floorboards cold against his bare feet. "Bathroom," he mumbled, though he knew she wouldn't answer. In the bathroom, the fluorescent light flickered on with a hum. Ryan looked at himself in the mirror. He looked older than 34. There were deep lines etched around his eyes, filled with the grime of the garage that never quite washed out. He looked like his father. He looked like a man who paid his bills and kept his head down. He opened the medicine cabinet to find aspirin for the headache that had been throbbing behind his temples since he got home. That was when he saw it. Tucked behind the bottle of ibuprofen was a receipt. It wasn't from the grocery store or the pharmacy. It was from the Gilded Lounge, a cocktail bar downtown. The kind of place where a single drink cost more than what Ryan made in an hour. The date was from last night, Tuesday. Jennifer had told him she was picking up an extra shift at the diner because they were short-staffed. She had come home smelling of cigarette smoke and mints, complaining about her feet. Ryan held the receipt. 2 martinis, 1 bourbon. He felt a physical blow to his gut, a nausea that had nothing to do with the flu. He carefully placed the receipt back exactly where he found it, behind the ibuprofen. He turned off the light and stood in the darkness of the bathroom, listening to the drip of the faucet. When he returned to the bedroom, the blue light on the nightstand had stopped pulsing. Jennifer had rolled over, facing the wall. Her phone was now face down. Ryan climbed back into bed, pulling the duvet up to his chin. The radiator hissed again, louder this time. He closed his eyes, but the image of the receipt burned behind his eyelids. The distance between them on the mattress felt like miles now. He wasn't just losing her. He realized with a terrifying clarity that he had already lost her. He was just the last one to know. The bell above the door at Dandy's Diner jingled, a sound Jennifer had come to associate with the onset of a headache. It was 1:30 p.m., the tail end of the lunch rush, and the air was thick with the smell of scorched bacon grease and floor cleaner. Jennifer wiped a table with a rag that had gone gray 3 hours ago, her back aching in that specific dull way that only standing on linoleum for 6 hours could produce. She looked out the window. The parking lot was a sea of rusted pickup trucks and faded sedans, except for one spot. A silver BMW convertible, gleaming under the harsh Pennsylvania sun, looked ridiculously out of place. It belonged to the man in booth 4, Derek. She knew his name because he made sure everyone knew it. He sold cars at the dealership down on Route 51, the kind with the giant inflatable gorilla on the roof. But Derek didn't look like the inflatable gorilla type. He wore a suit that fit too well, a watch that caught the light every time he moved his wrist, and he possessed a smile that seemed to suggest he knew a joke no one else heard. "More coffee, hun?" Jennifer asked, approaching his booth. She kept her voice flat, the practiced indifference of a waitress who just wanted to survive the shift. Derek looked up from his phone. He didn't look at the coffee pot. He looked directly at her. His eyes were a light, piercing blue, unclouded by the exhaustion that seemed to coat everyone else in this town. "I'm good on the caffeine." "Jennifer," he said. He said her name like he was tasting it. "But you look like you could use a break or a plane ticket." Jennifer paused, the pot hovering midair. "Excuse me?" "You just sighed," Derek said, leaning back, his leather watch strap creaking softly. It was a heavy sigh, the kind that says, "I was meant for better things than refilling this guy's bottomless cup of mud." A flush of heat crept up Jennifer's neck. It wasn't anger. It was the shock of being seen. Ryan never noticed when she sighed anymore. Ryan noticed if the milk was empty or if the cable bill was due. He saw the function of her, not the person. "I'm just tired," she said, her voice softening involuntarily. "Long week." "It's Tuesday," Derek pointed out, grinning. It was a predatory grin, but to Jennifer, starved for charm, it looked like a lifeline. "Tell you what, I've got to run back to the lot. But—" He pulled a business card from his pocket and slid it across the Formica table. Next to it, he placed a $20 bill. The bill was crisp, new. "If you ever want to test drive something that doesn't smell like French fries," he said, standing up. He dropped his voice, leaning in just close enough for her to smell his cologne, sandalwood and expensive tobacco. "Or if you just want to talk to someone who listens." He walked out, the bell jingling again. Jennifer watched him get into the silver car. He didn't look back. He knew she was watching. She swept the 20 and the card into her apron pocket quickly, before her manager, Barb, could see the size of the tip. Later, in the employee bathroom, the graffiti-covered walls closing in on her, Jennifer pulled out the card. Derek Vance, sales manager. On the back, in blue ink, he had written a cell number and 3 words. "Don't be shy." She thought of Ryan. He would be under a chassis right now, grease under his fingernails, thinking about saving money for a new water heater. He was good. He was steady. But steady felt like drowning. Her thumbs hovered over her screen. The cursor blinked, waiting. "Thanks for the generous tip," she typed. She stared at it. It was innocent enough. Polite. Professional. She hit send. Almost immediately, the bubbles appeared. It wasn't for the coffee the reply came. It was for the smile I'm hoping to see next time. Jennifer looked at her reflection in the dirty mirror. She applied a fresh coat of lipstick, a shade she hadn't worn in months. She wasn't smiling yet, but for the first time in a long time, she wasn't just tired. She was interested. The kitchen table was set. It was a small thing, a round wooden table they had bought at a yard sale 5 years ago, but Ryan had scrubbed it until the varnish gleamed. 2 plates, a store-bought lasagna that smelled of oregano and tomato paste, and a bottle of red wine that cost $12, a splurge for a Thursday. It was their 10th anniversary. Not the wedding anniversary, but the anniversary of the day they met at the county fair. It was a tradition Ryan had kept alive even when money was tight, a quiet nod to the beginning of everything. He sat in the dark, the only light coming from the street lamp outside and the small candle he had lit an hour ago. The wax was pooling near the base. It was 8:45 p.m. She said she would be home by 7:01. When the lock finally clicked, Ryan straightened up, smoothing the front of his flannel shirt. He had showered twice to get the smell of transmission fluid off his skin. Jennifer walked in. The air in the room shifted instantly. She brought with her a gust of cool evening air, but beneath that, there was something else. A scent Ryan didn't recognize. It wasn't the diner's grease, and it wasn't her usual vanilla body spray. It was musky, expensive, and faint, like she had been hugging someone who wore it. "You're late," Ryan said, keeping his voice soft to avoid sounding accusatory. Jennifer jumped, her hand flying to her chest. She hadn't seen him sitting in the shadows. "Jesus, Ryan, you scared me." She dropped her purse on the counter and immediately, instinctively, pulled her phone out of her pocket and placed it face down on the formica. The movement was practiced, fluid. "I called, Dutch," Ryan said, standing up. "Straight to voicemail." "The battery died," she lied. Ryan looked at the phone on the counter. He could see the faint glow of the screen reflecting off the polished surface. It was very much alive. He didn't say anything. "I'm sorry," she sighed, rubbing her temples. "It was crazy at the diner. Barb made me stay for cleanup. I'm exhausted, Luke. I just want to shower and sleep." She started to walk past him toward the hallway, not even glancing at the table, the wine or the lasagna that had gone cold. "Jennifer," Ryan said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. She stopped, turning slowly. When she saw the box, her face didn't soften with affection. It tightened with guilt. "I didn't forget," Ryan said. 10 years today, since the fair." He stepped forward and held it out. Jennifer took it hesitantly, her fingers brushing his. Her skin was cold. She opened the box. Inside was a silver bracelet with a small charm shaped like a Ferris wheel. It wasn't diamond or gold, but it had taken Ryan 3 months of side jobs to pay for. "Oh," she said. The word fell flat, heavy, and hollow in the quiet kitchen. "Ryan, I forgot. I didn't get you anything." "It doesn't matter," he said, searching her eyes for a spark, a smile, anything. "Do you like it?" Jennifer stared at the silver charm. For a second, Ryan thought she might cry. But then her phone buzzed against the counter behind her. The sound was like a gunshot in the silence. Jennifer's eyes darted to the phone, then back to the box. She snapped the lid shut. "It's beautiful," she said, but she didn't put it on. She placed the box on the table next to the cold lasagna. "Thank you, really, but I can't. I smell like old fry oil. Let me shower first." She turned and hurried into the bathroom, closing the door firmly. The lock clicked. Ryan stood alone in the kitchen. He looked at the closed bathroom door, then at the phone she had left on the counter in her haste. It buzzed again. 2 short vibrations. He took a step toward it. His hand trembled. He could flip it over. He could see who was texting his wife at 9 p.m. on their anniversary. The truth was right there, inches away. But he stopped. He pulled his hand back. He was afraid that if he looked, he would have to leave. And despite the coldness, despite the strange perfume and the lying eyes, he wasn't ready to leave yet. He blew out the candle. The room went dark. It started raining at 2 o'clock, a cold gray drizzle that turned the soot on the Pittsburgh streets into a slick black paste. At the garage, a customer canceled a transmission rebuild last minute, leaving Ryan with an empty afternoon. It was a rare gift. 3 hours of paid time off. He washed his hands with the gritty orange soap, scrubbing until his knuckles were raw, and decided to drive by the diner. He told himself he wanted to offer Jennifer a ride home so she wouldn't have to take the bus in the rain. He didn't tell himself the other reason, that he needed to see her face when she didn't know he was looking. He parked his truck, a rusted Ford F-150 that rattled when it idled, across the street from Dandy's Diner. He cut the engine and waited. The wipers stopped mid-swipe, leaving a streak of water across his view. 10 minutes later, the diner door opened. Jennifer stepped out. She wasn't wearing her uniform. She was wearing a dress he hadn't seen before, a deep red thing that clung to her in a way her waitress apron never did. She looked around nervously, checking the street, checking the windows. Ryan's hand moved to the door handle to wave, but he froze. A silver BMW pulled up to the curb. The convertible top was up against the rain, but the windows were down. Ryan recognized the car instantly. It was the same one from the parking lot he'd seen before, the one that belonged to the man with the expensive suit. Derek. Jennifer didn't hesitate. She opened the passenger door and slid inside, laughing at something the man said. It was a bright, open laugh, her head thrown back, a sound Ryan hadn't heard in the apartment for years. The car pulled away, merging smoothly into traffic. Ryan didn't scream. He didn't punch the dashboard. He felt a strange, cold calm settle over him, like he was watching a movie he had already seen the ending to. He turned the key. The Ford groaned to life. He followed them. He kept two cars between them, driving on autopilot. They drove past the residential neighborhoods, past the shopping centers, out toward the edge of town, where the strip malls gave way to industrial parks and budget lodging. They turned into the Blue Heron Motel. It was a low U-shaped building with peeling blue paint and a neon sign that buzzed audibly even from the road. It was the kind of place people went when they didn't want to be found. Ryan pulled into the parking lot of a gas station across the road. He watched through the rain-streaked windshield. He saw the silver BMW park in front of room 112. He saw Derek get out, holding an umbrella. He walked around to the passenger side and opened the door for Jennifer. As she stood up, Derek pulled her close. His hand didn't go to her waist. It went to the small of her back, possessive and familiar. Jennifer looked up at him, and for a second the umbrella tilted, exposing her face. The look in her eyes wasn't guilt. It was adoration. It was the look she used to give Ryan when they were 22 and eating cotton candy at the county fair. They went inside. The door to room 112 closed. The lock clicked, or at least Ryan imagined the sound of the deadbolt sliding home. He sat there for a long time. The rain drummed on the roof of his truck, a relentless, deafening rhythm. He could walk over there. He could kick the door down. He could drag her out and demand an explanation. But looking at the closed door, Ryan realized there was nothing to explain. The conversation was already over. The marriage wasn't dying. It was dead. He was just the last one standing at the graveside. He put the truck in reverse. He didn't look at room 112 again. He turned the wheel and drove back toward the city. The silence in the cab louder than the storm outside. The apartment was exactly as he had left it, but it felt entirely different. It was like walking into a museum exhibit of a life that had ended centuries ago. The air was stale. The silence was absolute. Ryan closed the door softly behind him. He didn't slam it. There was no point in making noise when there was no one there to hear it. He walked into the living room and sat down on the beige sofa they had bought on a payment plan 3 years ago. He looked at his hands resting on his knees. They were still dirty. The grease was deep in the ridges of his fingerprints, a permanent tattoo of his labor. He thought about Derek. He thought about the clean, manicured hands he had seen on the steering wheel of the BMW. He thought about the suit, the car, the easy laughter. Derek was a man who sold dreams. He sold shiny metal and leather seats and the promise that you could be someone else if you just signed on the dotted line. Ryan sold repairs. He sold brake pads and oil changes. He kept old things running when they should have been scrapped. That was his role. He was the mechanic. He fixed things. But looking around the room, at the pile of unpaid bills on the counter, the scuff marks on the floor, the wedding photo where Jennifer's smile seemed so much brighter than it had been in years, he realized this wasn't an engine. There was no part he could replace to make it run smooth again. He stood up and walked to the window. The rain had stopped, leaving the street below slick and black. For a long time, Ryan had told himself that he was the rock, that his stability, his hard work, his quiet dedication was what Jennifer needed. He thought he was the anchor that kept them safe in the storm. But standing there, he realized the truth. Jennifer didn't want to be safe. She wanted to fly. And to a kite, an anchor isn't a safety measure. It's just a weight. He was the weight. He imagined her coming home later tonight. She would have that flushed look on her face, the one she would try to hide. She would make up a story about the diner, about a rude customer, about why she smelled like rain and expensive cologne, and he would have to sit there and listen to it. He would have to pretend to believe it, or he would have to fight, and he was so tired of fighting the silence. No, he whispered to the empty room. He wouldn't give her the chance to lie. He wouldn't give her the satisfaction of seeing him broken or angry or begging. He wouldn't be the pathetic husband waiting by the door. He turned away from the window and walked toward the bedroom. He pulled his old duffel bag from the top shelf of the closet. It smelled of dust. He unzipped it. The sound was loud, decisive. He didn't pack everything. He didn't want everything. He packed his work boots. He packed his jeans, his flannel shirts, his razor. He left the book she had bought him that he never read. He left the television. He left the bed. He moved methodically, efficiently, like he was packing a toolbox. But his chest felt hollowed out, as if someone had reached inside and removed his lungs. He was dismantling his life, shirt by shirt, sock by sock. When the bag was full, he zipped it up. He looked around the bedroom one last time. The bed was still unmade from the morning. Her pillow still held the indentation of her head. It looked intimate, domestic, and utterly false. He slung the bag over his shoulder. He was ready to go, but there was one last thing he needed to do. One last message to leave that would say everything he couldn't find the words for. Ryan walked into the kitchen with his bag slung over his shoulder. The weight of it was grounding, a physical reminder that he was actually doing this. He wasn't just threatening to leave, he was already gone. He stopped at the counter, his hand hovering over the junk drawer, that universal catch-all in every American home where batteries, rubber bands, and forgotten memories went to die. He pulled it open. It rattled with the sound of loose change and screwdrivers. He dug past a stack of takeout menus and a broken flashlight until his fingers brushed against the glossy edge of photo paper. He pulled it out. It was a Polaroid, the edges soft and fraying. The colors had faded slightly, shifting toward a nostalgic sepia, but the image was sharp enough to cut him. It was 10 years ago. The county fair. They were sitting on the hood of his first truck, a beat-up Chevy. Jennifer was holding a stick of blue cotton candy, laughing with her mouth half full, her eyes crinkled shut in pure delight. Ryan was in the frame too, looking at her. He stared at his younger self. That boy didn't have grease under his nails or gray in his beard. That boy looked at Jennifer like she was the only source of light in the universe. Ryan felt a sting behind his eyes, but he refused to let it turn into tears. Tears were for people who thought there was still hope. This wasn't sadness. It was an autopsy. He flipped the photo over. The back was stark white, a blank canvas. He reached for the black permanent marker they kept in the drawer for labeling freezer bags. He uncapped it. The smell of the ink was sharp, chemical. He didn't write a letter. He didn't write, "I hate you," or "How could you," or "I'm leaving." Those words were invitations for a response, for an argument, for her to twist the truth until he was the one apologizing. He pressed the tip of the marker to the white back of the photo. He wrote just 2 lines. Blue Heron Motel, room 1 on 12, 2:40 p.m. He capped the marker and set it down. He placed the photograph on the kitchen counter, right next to the fruit bowl. He placed it face down. The white back with the black lettering was facing up, screaming in the silence of the kitchen. When she walked in, it would be the first thing she saw. And when she turned it over, she would see what she had traded for a cheap afternoon in a roadside motel. Ryan reached into his pocket and pulled out his key ring. He worked the house key off the split ring. It made a metallic ching sound as he dropped it onto the counter, right next to the photo. The sound of the key hitting the laminate was the period at the end of the sentence. He didn't look back. He didn't scan the apartment for things he might have forgotten. He walked to the front door, opened it, and stepped out into the hallway. The door clicked shut behind him. It wasn't a slam. It was just a click. The sound of a lock engaging, sealing a tomb. He walked down the stairs out of the building and into the cool evening air. He climbed into his truck, tossed his bag onto the passenger seat, and started the engine. As he pulled away from the curb, merging into the traffic leaving the city, he checked his rearview mirror. The apartment window was dark. He kept driving. He didn't know exactly where he was going, but for the first time in years, he knew exactly who he was. He was a man who was no longer waiting. Jennifer unlocked the door, her shoulders already tensed for the performance. She had practiced her lines on the bus ride home. The manager kept me late. Inventory took forever. My phone died. She had rehearsed the tone of voice, exhausted but apologetic, just the right amount of irritation to make it believable. She pushed the door open. "Ryan, I'm so sorry, Her voice died in the hallway. The silence that greeted her wasn't the usual quiet of a sleeping spouse. It was a vacuum. It was the heavy, sterile silence of a room that had been stripped of life. The TV wasn't murmuring in the background. The shower wasn't running. The smell of dinner, if there had ever been any, had dissipated, leaving only the stale scent of old carpet and lemon polish. "Ryan," she called again, stepping inside. She walked into the living room. The couch was empty. The cushions were unruffled. She checked the bedroom. The bed was made, or rather stripped. The closet door was ajar. She saw the empty space on the top shelf where his duffel bag used to be. A cold prickle of dread started at the base of her spine. She walked back to the kitchen, her heels clicking loudly on the linoleum. That was when she saw it. On the counter where the fruit bowl usually sat was his house key. It lay there like a dead insect, silver and final. Next to it was a photograph placed face down. Jennifer's breath hitched. She reached out, her hand trembling slightly. She knew that key. She knew what it meant for it to be left behind. She picked up the photograph first. Written on the white back, in Ryan's blocky, deliberate handwriting, were the coordinates of her betrayal. Blue Heron Motel. Room 112, 2:40 p.m. The air rushed out of her lungs. It wasn't a question. It wasn't an accusation. It was a transcript. He had been there. He had seen the car. He had seen her dress. He had seen the umbrella. She stared at the numbers. 2:40 p.m. The exact minute she had felt happy. The exact minute she had forgotten she was a wife. Slowly terrified, she flipped the photo over. She looked at the image of the two of them at the county fair. 10 years ago. They looked so young it hurt. Ryan looked at her in the photo with a devotion that felt like a physical weight. She looked at herself, her eyes bright, her smile unguarded, holding that blue cotton candy. She remembered that girl. That girl believed that love was enough to pay the bills and fix the leaks. That girl didn't know how tired she would get. Jennifer dropped the photo onto the counter. It slid next to the key. She expected to cry. She expected to fall to the floor, to scream, to call his cell phone and beg. She waited for the wave of devastation to hit her, but it didn't come. Instead, she felt her shoulders drop. The tension that had been coiling in her gut for months, the constant fear of the wrong text message popping up, the exhaustion of tracking her own lies, suddenly unspooled. He knew. It was over. She didn't have to lie anymore. She didn't have to pretend to be happy about a silver bracelet or a fixed radiator. The worst thing that could happen had happened, and she was still standing. The apartment was quiet, yes, but it was also spacious. She looked at the empty closet space in her mind's eye. Ryan was gone. He had made the decision for her. He had cut the cord she had been too cowardly to sever herself. Jennifer reached into her purse. Her hand brushed past the charger she hadn't used and found her phone. She swiped the screen. She didn't call Ryan. She dialed the number saved under D. It rang twice. Hello? Derek's voice was smooth, confident, backed by the faint hum of a television. He knows, Jennifer said. Her voice was steady, surprisingly calm in the empty kitchen. There was a pause on the line. What do you mean? Ryan, he knows everything. He left. Jennifer picked up the key, turning the cold metal over in her fingers. I'm alone. Oh, Derek said. The tone was hard to read. Surprise, perhaps a flicker of calculation. Then the charm kicked back in. Well, grab a bag, babe. My place has better wine anyway. Jennifer hung up. She looked at the photo one last time, at the boy who had loved her and the girl she used to be. She left it there on the counter next to the key. She didn't want to take that girl with her. The world inside the cab of the Peterbilt 579 was defined by vibration. It was a low, constant hum that traveled up through the seat, into Ryan's spine, and settled in his teeth. Outside, the plains of Nebraska were flattening out, stretching into a horizon that seemed to go on forever, broken only by the occasional silo or the skeletal arm of an irrigation pivot. It had been 2 years, 730 days, give or take, since he had dropped that key on the counter. Ryan shifted gears, the engine growling in response. He didn't look like a mechanic anymore. The grease was gone from his cuticles, replaced by the dry, cracked skin of a man who lived in climate control and wind. He had grown a beard, thick and unkempt, weaving in more gray than brown. He wore a mesh back cap pulled low over his eyes, shielding them from the relentless glare of the asphalt. He had taken the CDL test 3 weeks after leaving Pittsburgh. He had traded the transmission fluid of the repair shop for the diesel fumes of the open highway. It was a good trade. The road didn't ask questions. The road didn't have a phone that buzzed at 2:01 a.m. The road was honest. If you didn't respect it, it killed you. Simple as that. He reached for the thermos in the cup holder. The coffee was lukewarm and bitter, gas station mud he had picked up in Des Moines. But he drank it anyway. His phone sat on the dashboard, mounted in a cradle. It rarely rang. He had changed his number. The only people who called were dispatchers telling him where to pick up a load of steel coils or drop off a trailer of frozen beef. Sometimes in the quiet hours just before dawn, when the highway was empty and the only light came from his high beams cutting through the black, he thought about her. He thought about Jennifer, but the anger was gone. It had evaporated somewhere around mile marker 400 on the I-70. Now the memory of her was like looking at a scar on his arm. He remembered how he got it. He remembered it hurt like hell when it happened, but now it was just tight skin. He pulled into a truck stop near the Wyoming border as the sun began to dip, painting the sky in bruised shades of purple and orange. The air brakes hissed, a sigh of relief from the massive machine. Ryan grabbed his wallet and climbed down. His legs were stiff. He walked into the travel center, bypassing the arcade games and the rows of cheap souvenirs. He went straight to the diner counter. "What can I get you, sugar?" the waitress asked. She was older, with tired eyes and a name tag that read Brenda. "Black coffee, slice of cherry pie," Ryan said. His voice was gravelly from disuse. He realized he hadn't spoken a word out loud in 6 hours. "Coming right up." "You heading east or west?" Brenda asked, pouring the coffee. She seemed to want to talk, to bridge the gap of loneliness that hung over the place. "West," Ryan said. He didn't offer more. He didn't tell her he was hauling lumber to Salt Lake City. He didn't tell her he used to have a wife who waited tables just like her. He ate quickly. He didn't look at the other drivers. He saw them, though. Men like him, running from mortgages, from ex-wives, from mistakes, or just running because they didn't know how to stop. They were a fraternity of ghosts, passing each other in the night. He left a $5 tip on a $4 check. Back in the truck, he climbed into the sleeper berth. It was a small space, barely enough to turn around in, but it was his. No one else had a key. No one else slept there. He lay back on the narrow mattress and listened to the idling engines of the trucks parked on either side of him. It was a lullaby of horsepower. He closed his eyes. He was alone, completely and utterly. And for the first time in his life, being alone didn't feel like a punishment. It felt like armor. The view from Derek's condo on the 14th floor was undeniable. It looked out over the glittering grid of Pittsburgh, a panorama of lights that made the city look like a jewelry box. When Jennifer had first moved in 2 years ago, she used to stand at this floor-to-ceiling window and feel like she had won a lottery she didn't buy a ticket for. Now she just noticed the drafts. The seal on the expensive double-pane glass was broken, letting in a high-pitched whistle of wind that Derek promised to get fixed 6 months ago. He hadn't. Jennifer sat at the glass dining table, staring at the stack of envelopes Derek had forgotten on the kitchen island. They weren't love letters. They were final notices. The homeowners association fees, the lease on the BMW, the credit card bill from Neiman Marcus. The front door beeped, and Derek breezed in. He brought the same energy he always did. Loud, chaotic, smelling of winter air and too much cologne. "Babe, you won't believe the deal I closed today," he announced, tossing his keys onto the leather sofa. "Escalade, fully loaded. Guy didn't even blink at the financing." He walked over to her, expecting the usual kiss, the usual adoration. Jennifer didn't move. She tapped her fingernail on the stack of envelopes. "The power company called, Derek," she said. Her voice was flat. "They're shutting it off on Monday." Derek stopped. His smile faltered, then reassembled itself into something tighter, less convincing. "I told you I handled that. It's a clerical error. These utility companies are morons." "It's the third clerical error this month," Jennifer said. She looked at him, really looked at him. The suit was still sharp, but the cuffs were fraying slightly. The charm that had once felt electric now felt rehearsed. A script he used on everyone from customers to creditors to her. "Don't be a buzzkill, Elle," he snapped, turning to the fridge. He pulled out a beer. "I'm hustling out there all day. I come home. I want a little peace, a little appreciation." Jennifer felt a cold knot tighten in her stomach. Appreciation. It was the same word she had used against Ryan. "He doesn't appreciate me." Derek's phone buzzed on the counter. He reached for it with a speed that was almost athletic. He glanced at the screen, and for a split second, his face softened. It wasn't the look of a man dealing with a client. It was the look of a man chasing a high. He thumbed a quick reply and slid the phone into his pocket. "Who was that?" Jennifer asked. "Work," Derek said instantly. "Client, asking about the Escalade. At 9 o'clock at night? Sales never sleep, babe. You know that." He took a swig of his beer and walked toward the living room, turning on the massive television to drown out the silence. Jennifer sat there frozen. The lie was so lazy, so insultingly thin. She remembered how Ryan used to be. Ryan, who couldn't lie to save his life. Ryan, who put his paycheck in the joint account every Friday without fail. Ryan, who fixed the radiator because he didn't want her to be cold, not because he wanted credit for it. She had left Ryan because she was bored. She had wanted a spark. She looked at Derek, slumped on the leather sofa, texting again with a smirk on his face. She realized with a nauseating clarity that she hadn't found a spark. She had just found a mirror. Derek was exactly what she deserved. He was selfish, he was shallow, and he was already looking for the next shiny thing. She stood up and walked to the window. The city lights blurred as her eyes filled with tears. She wasn't crying for Derek. She was crying because she finally understood the value of a man who simply came home, washed his hands, and stayed. And she knew with a terrifying certainty that she was about to be the one left behind this time. The breakdown didn't happen with a bang. It happened with a surrender. Ryan was 40 miles west of the Ohio-Pennsylvania border, hauling a flatbed of steel piping, when the temperature gauge on the Peterbilt spiked red. A moment later, white steam billowed from under the hood, blinding and violent, obscuring the interstate. He managed to wrestle the rig onto the shoulder of an exit ramp leading to a town called Columbiana. He killed the engine. The silence that followed was heavy, punctuated only by the angry hissing of the radiator. Ryan stepped out into the biting wind. He popped the hood. A blown hose. It was a simple fix, but he didn't have the part. He'd have to wait for the mobile mechanic dispatch was sending, which meant at least 2 hours in a town that consisted of 3 gas stations and a diner. He locked the cab and walked toward the diner. The sign above the door read, "The Iron Skillet," the neon flickering uncertainly in the gray afternoon light. He pushed the door open. A bell jingled. It was the same generic, cheerful sound that hung over the door of every diner in America, but it made Ryan flinch. It sounded too much like the bell at Dandy's back in Pittsburgh. He shook the snow off his coat and walked to a booth in the back corner, away from the windows. He didn't want to be seen. He just wanted coffee and warmth while he waited for the mechanic. The place was half empty. A couple of truckers sat at the counter, hunched over their phones. An elderly couple ate soup in silence near the front. "Be right with you," a voice called out from behind the service counter. Ryan froze. His hand, halfway to the paper menu, stopped in midair. He knew that voice. He knew the timbre of it, the way the vowels flattened out at the end of a sentence. It was a voice he hadn't heard in 3 years, except in the nightmares he tried to suppress. He slowly lowered his hand. He didn't turn around. He stared at the scratched formica table, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. "It's not her," he told himself. "It's just a coincidence. You're tired. You've been on the road too long." He heard footsteps approaching. The squeak of rubber soles on tile. The smell of coffee and stale fryer oil drifted closer, the scent of her old life. "Sorry about the wait. We're short-staffed today," the waitress said, stopping at his table. She placed a glass of water down. "Can I start you off with—" The voice trailed off. The silence that descended on the booth was absolute. It drowned out the clatter of silverware and the hum of the refrigerator. Ryan forced himself to look up. It was Jennifer. But it wasn't the Jennifer he had left. It wasn't the Jennifer in the red dress getting into the BMW. And it wasn't the Jennifer from the county fair photo. This Jennifer looked older. There were fine lines around her mouth that hadn't been there before. Her hair was pulled back in a messy, practical bun, secured with a cheap plastic clip. She wore a stained yellow uniform that was a size too big for her. She looked thin. She looked tired in a way that sleep couldn't fix. Her eyes were wide, staring at him with a mixture of terror and disbelief. The coffee pot in her hand trembled, the dark liquid sloshing dangerously close to the rim. "Ryan," she whispered. The word came out like a question, as if she wasn't sure he was real. Ryan looked at her. He saw the name tag pinned to her uniform. It didn't say Jennifer. It said New Girl. He felt a sudden, sharp pain in his chest. Not anger, but a profound, aching pity that he hadn't expected. He had imagined this moment 1,000 times. In his head, he was always cold, dismissive, triumphant. But seeing her standing there holding a heavy pot of coffee in a dead-end town in Ohio, he didn't feel triumphant. He just felt the tragedy of it all. "Hello, Jennifer," Ryan said. His voice was rough but steady. She gripped the coffee pot tighter, her knuckles turning white. She looked like she wanted to run. She looked toward the kitchen, then back at him. She stammered. I didn't know. I didn't know you drove this route." "I drive all the routes," Ryan said. He didn't look away. "Are you going to pour that, or are you going to drop it?" Jennifer poured the coffee. Her hand shook so violently that a splash of dark liquid hit the table, spreading into the cracks of the formica. She stared at the spill, paralyzed, as if it were an oil tanker disaster she had personally caused. "Sit down," Ryan said. It wasn't an order. It was an invitation born of exhaustion. "I can't," Jennifer whispered, clutching the pot against her stained apron. "My manager, Rick, he's watching. If Rick has a problem, I'll buy the damn coffee pot," Ryan said, his voice low and level. "Sit down, Jennifer." She hesitated, looking back at the kitchen, then slid into the booth opposite him. She sat on the edge of the vinyl seat, ready to bolt. Up close, Ryan could see the details he had missed from a distance. The lack of makeup, the cheap drugstore earrings, the absence of a wedding ring, either his or anyone else's. "How are you?" she asked. The banality of the question hung in the air, ridiculous and small. "I'm alive," Ryan said. He took a sip of the coffee. It was burnt. "You look different." "I left him," she blurted out. She needed him to know. She needed that fact to be on the table between them, like a peace offering. 8 months after you left. It wasn't what I thought. He was in debt. He cheated on me with his secretary. I walked out." Ryan nodded slowly. He felt no vindication. He felt no satisfaction in hearing that Derek was exactly who Ryan knew he was. "I know. You know." "I knew the day I left," Ryan said. "You don't buy a used car without checking under the hood, Jennifer. I knew what you were buying." Jennifer flinched. She looked down at her hands, twisting a napkin into a tight rope. "I'm sorry, Luke. I say it every day. I say it to the ceiling. I say it to the sink while I'm washing dishes. I messed up everything. I traded gold for tinfoil." Ryan watched her. He remembered how much he used to love her. It was a distant memory, like a movie he had seen once in childhood. He could recall the plot, but he couldn't feel the emotions anymore. "Why are you here, Jennifer?" he asked. "In Ohio. This is a long way from Pittsburgh." "I couldn't stay there," she said. "Every street corner reminded me of what I did. I just started driving west. I ran out of gas here." She reached into her apron pocket. It wasn't a notepad she pulled out. It was a worn, cheap leather wallet. She opened it. Behind the clear plastic of the ID slot, where most people kept pictures of their children or their dogs, was a photograph. It was the Polaroid. It was bent at the corners, the surface scratched from being taken out and put back in 1,000 times. The colors were fading, but the image of the two of them at the county fair was still visible. Jennifer pulled it out and flipped it over. The black marker ink had bled slightly into the paper over the years, but the message was still legible. Blue Heron Motel. Room 112. 2:40 p.m. "I kept it," she said, her voice cracking. Tears welled in her eyes, hot and fast. "I look at it every day. I look at the time. 2:40 p.m., the exact minute I ruined my life." She pushed the photo across the table toward him. Her fingers lingered on it for a second before pulling back. "I kept it to remember you," she choked out. "To remember that someone actually loved me once. Real love. Not that flashy garbage." Ryan looked at the photo. He saw his own handwriting. He remembered the rage he had felt when he wrote it, the cold, shaking anger. But looking at it now, sitting in a diner that smelled of bacon and regret, the anger was gone. He didn't touch the photo. He didn't pick it up. "You didn't keep it to remember me, Jennifer," Ryan said softly. She looked up, startled, tears streaking down her cheeks. "What?" You kept it to punish yourself, he said. That photo isn't a memory. It's a sentence. You've been serving time in a prison you built yourself. He looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the exhaustion in her soul. She was waiting for him to absolve her. She was waiting for him to say it was okay, to sweep the pieces back together. But Ryan was a mechanic. He knew when a part was too broken to be fixed. Ryan reached out with a hand that was calloused and scarred from years of gripping steering wheels and lug wrenches. He didn't take the photograph. Instead, he placed his index finger on the edge of it and gently slid it back across the table toward her. I don't want it, Jennifer, he said. Jennifer looked at the photo, then up at him, her eyes wide with panic. But it's us. It's the only thing left. It's not us, Ryan corrected her gently. It's a picture of two kids who don't exist anymore. You're not that girl in the cotton candy line, and I'm not the boy who thought he could fix everything if he just worked hard enough. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a $10 bill. He placed it on the table, right next to the coffee stain she had made. I forgive you, Ryan said. The words hung in the air, heavier than any accusation. Jennifer crumbled slightly, her shoulders shaking. You do? I do, Ryan said, and he meant it. The anger that had fueled him for the first year on the road, the bitterness that had tasted like copper in his mouth was gone. It had been replaced by a vast, quiet indifference. I forgive you, but I don't want to know you. He slid out of the booth. He stood up, towering over the table in his heavy work boots. He looked down at her one last time. She looked small, trapped in her yellow uniform, trapped in this small town, trapped in the memory of a mistake she couldn't outrun. Take care of yourself, Elle, he said. He didn't wait for a response. He turned and walked toward the door. The bell jingled above him, a cheerful sound marking a somber exit. The cold air of the parking lot hit him like a slap, waking him up. The mobile mechanic's van was pulling away from his truck. The hood was down. The bill was tucked under the wiper blade. The hose was fixed. Ryan walked to the Peterbilt. He climbed up into the cab, the familiar smell of diesel and old coffee greeting him like an old friend. He sat in the driver's seat and turned the key. The massive engine roared to life, shaking the frame, vibrating through the soles of his boots. He checked his mirrors. In the side mirror, he could see the window of the iron skillet. Through the glass, he saw a silhouette standing there. She was watching him. She was holding the photograph against the glass, as if showing it to him one last time could turn the truck around. Ryan put the truck in gear. He released the air brake. The hiss was sharp and final. He didn't wave. He didn't blink. He eased the clutch out, and the 18-wheeler began to move, rolling slowly toward the on-ramp for Interstate 80. As he merged onto the highway, picking up speed, the vibration settled into his bones, steady and rhythmic. He looked at the passenger seat. It was empty. It was peaceful. He glanced at the rear-view mirror one last time. The diner was just a speck of neon light in the gray afternoon. Then the road curved, and it was gone. Ryan shifted into high gear, staring straight ahead at the white lines stretching out toward the horizon. He had a load to deliver in Salt Lake City by Tuesday. He had a job to do. And for the first time in a long time, the road ahead looked a lot clearer than what he was leaving behind.